I got this amazing question from backstab_Bob on Instagram. The question is, as a man of 2 meters and 2 cultures, how would you think that a departure of dictatorship can start? Talking about Russia. Are there any democratic interests strong enough to take power when Putler finally returns to the ground? As someone who has never been there, it seems to me that the Russians always had one person leading them, and it's almost in the culture. Thank you for this great question, backstab_Bob. I mean, removing Putin just won't let democracy suddenly flourish, unfortunately. I believe that there needs to be a greater shift of Russians' mentality for democracy to take hold and have a fighting chance in Russia. Let me explain. First of all, yes, after the invasion of Ukraine, I have no respect whatsoever for Putin's Russia and everything it stands for today.
What did you say?
But I don't wish death to Russians. Come on, I don't wish death to anybody. Well, except maybe for rapists and child molesters. I mean, fuck that low-life excrement. What I wish for Russia is something more difficult. An identity crisis, followed by cultural change and growth. And to achieve that, Russia must lose big. Like Nazi Germany and Japan did in World War II. After the war, Germany and Japan had to take a long, hard look at themselves and their culture and their identity as a people. And they did something about it. They changed, they grew, and some brutal and honest self-examination. And look at them now. Germany is the strongest economy in Europe at this moment, and Japan is a global tech powerhouse and among top 10 most influential countries in the world. While Russia still struggles with indoor plumbing, dental care, and value of life.
Is strong motherland!
But I digress. Russia, or its previous form of Soviet Union, didn't lose big in World War II like Nazi Germany and Japan did. Of course, they lost a lot of people. So they never had to take a good, hard look at themselves and reevaluate themselves. The Soviets were too busy deporting or executing people, especially their own, and their expansionist, imperialistic ideas that have been there in place for several hundred years, they have persisted.
There is no such country as Ukraine. No. We need to liberate Paris, march in Berlin, nuke London, nuke everybody.
All these centuries under batshit crazy leaders, and then the horror of communism, made Russians used to batshit crazy leaders. Besides, Russians are professional sufferers and martyrs, which doesn't really help the situation. I mean, just look at how Russians always writing letters, begging their Tsar Putin for basic things that are a given in any functioning democracy. All this, and especially communism, has led to a degradation of the individual, where the individual has no independent importance. And in that kind of environment, morality and value of life especially go out the fucking window, or communism won't work. Yes, Putin is a dictator and a genocidal piece of shit. But the genocidal war on Ukraine is not only Putin's, it's also the Russian people's. You see, prejudice against Ukraine and Ukrainians as their own people has permeated the Russian culture since the dissolution of Soviet Union. Even I remember growing up in Russia with jokes and those so-called anecdotes about those sneaky Ukrainians. So it's been there. It's been there as part of the culture. Oh, and this so-called Russian culture. Russians joke and laugh at other countries, cultures, ethnicities. Hell, I still remember that the N-word was still commonly used when I was just a boy growing up in Russia. I guess it's a way to deal with the shitty existence in Russia, to look down on others. But I believe that it's a subconscious fear. Despite the propaganda, the constant brainwashing, and the whole delusion of grandeur, Russians are afraid of the foreign because it shatters their illusion and exposes their shitty existence by comparison. I mean, nothing screams great strong motherland nation like when you need help from North Korea. And Putin doesn't give a shit about his own people. Like, for example, recently, Russian air defense systems have been placed on the rooftops of civilian buildings around Moscow. Like, talk about Operation Human Shield. Because Russians know that the Ukrainians aren't really like Russians, so they wouldn't intentionally bomb civilian buildings. But, of course, not all Russians are apolitical. Good, brave people have protested during Putin's 26-year-long dictatorship. The younger generation has grown up with the internet and got the chance to travel to other countries and draw their own conclusions and think for themselves without the nostalgia for Soviet communist enslavement. But the censorship and various freedoms were constricted more and more during Putin's autocratic reign, and these activists were either silenced, killed, or they chose to leave Russia. And the ones who stayed, they couldn't get enough traction and lost hope because a big part of the population is apolitical, because they're just used to corrupt, genocidal pieces of shit ruling in the Kremlin. Apparently, those apolitical Russians were perfectly fine with 4 years of genocidal war on a brotherly people. But once their internet got restricted and the war came back home and life became a little bit inconvenient, then the average Russian starts to protest. And mind you, not against the bombing of Ukrainian civilians, train stations, food markets, not against blowing up Ukrainian churches, schools, kindergartens, maternity hospitals. The Russians were protesting because they suddenly couldn't order food delivery online. It's disgusting. Well, but at least they started to speak up against the Kremlin. It's not the first time that the Russian army has behaved like this in recent years. For example, Russian army had practiced bombing civilian hospitals in Syria. It's also there they started using something called double tap. It's when you bomb a place and then you wait until the first responders show up. And then a second strike comes. Pure fucking evil. And the sad thing is, Russians behave like this because they don't really value life, especially of their own. And if you don't value the life of your own people, what happens when you go to war with that mentality? It's especially prominent in Russian military. Did you know that between 3,000 to 5,000 Russian young men either die during the mandatory military service they have to do once they turn 18, or commit suicide afterwards, annually? 3,000 to 5,000 each year because of the abuse, torture, hazing, and rape in the military. Imagine sending this to invade a peaceful neighbor like Ukraine. Right now, during its 5th year of the genocidal invasion of Ukraine, there are more than 200,000 documented war crimes committed by Russian soldiers. And just to make things clear regarding the most successful attempt at some sorts of opposition in Russia, Alexei Navalny, yes, he gave people hope. Just because there was a tiny chance of somebody, anybody, replacing Putin. And Navalny was a fucking racist and he participated in the so-called Russian marches with neo-Nazis. Imagine that being a hopeful alternative to Putin. And isn't Russia fighting Nazis in Ukraine?
No. It's the imperialistic, perverted, satanic, homosexual, gay Europa and the collective West. Да.
Oh, isn't it where all the oligarchs keep their mistresses? And where they send their children to live and study?
No.
The scariest part of Russian mentality, though, is this inability to understand and respect that somebody wouldn't want to be a part of Russia and then punish them for that. History shows us that everyone who rebelled against the Moscow rule and managed to break free from the hellish enslavement by the Kremlin has blossomed into something better and greater on their own. And none of them want to go back. Everybody rebelled, except for the Russians, who still have to beg their Tsar for running water, indoor toilets, and teeth. Because of this, Russia uses the scorched earth approach when it wages war, especially now as they're losing their war in Ukraine on all fronts and just collapsing internally. It's the only thing they can do: bomb civilians. There is this scary line by the Russian villain Andrei Sater in Christopher Nolan's movie Tenet, as he's talking to his wife, and the line is, "If I can't have you, no one can." Or in Putin's own words, why do we need a world if Russia is not in it? So, as you can see, the current conditions in Russia, the mentality and the so-called culture of Russian people are far from optimal for a democracy to flourish in. At the moment, Putin must be stopped by any means. And as Christoph Müller once said on his YouTube channel Talk for Ukraine, dictators cannot be defeated by discussion. So Russia must lose, for the sake of Ukraine and the rest of the free civilized world, but also for Russia itself, so we can finally have a chance to become something better, but also to set an example to other bloodthirsty authoritarian states out there and show them the genocidal invasion of peaceful neighbors can destroy them. Good always prevails over evil, sooner or later, and history has so many examples of it. And mainly, Russia must lose big this time so we can finally have a chance to learn the value of life.